Good morning. My name is Jonathan Williams. I'm here today with Eyes on Books. My co-host today is Fran Conroy.
Good morning, Jonathan.
And we're going to be talking about Lisa C's remarkable book, Lady Tan's Circle of Women.
Jonathan, did you think it was for women only?
Yes.
When you read the book?
Yes. Look, I would never have picked this book off the shelf to read it. My sister loves her stories, but it was not for me. I prefer mystery stories, murder mysteries, spy stories, tough guy stories. That is my library right there.
I'm the same way. I'm the same way. Lisa's books are fabulous. I've read other books, and she transports you back to China, and this is during the Ming Dynasty. And what did you find interesting most with this?
Well, there's so many things. What a remarkable period. This is 500 years ago. Just to set it clearly, this takes place between the years roughly 1482, I think. I'm not sure quite when it ends, but those last years of the 15th century, got that right. And what a remarkable period. We've often heard about the Ming Dynasty. It sounds like a very important time in history, but in any case, it was a remarkable story. You know, the job of a novel is to solve a problem, is to take you on a journey. And this book is very much a hero's journey. Yeah. So that part fits in just fine with my appetite for reading.
Right. Once you start reading her books, the only difficulty I had was pronunciation of some of the Chinese names, but the story and the history behind it comes alive. Especially one section of it really stood out when she had to, Yu Xian, it's very hard for me to pronounce those names, was taking care of this woman whose feet were bound. She was a young child. And China at that time, the smaller the foot, the better it was. So I could actually picture and feel the cracking of the bones and the tying and the salves going on, and what this young child was learning from her grandparents, which was unheard of in China. Because the women's place, especially with Lady Tran, who was high society, she was just right below the emperor. She just, she wanted a wife for her son that was also high caliber. And this marriage was made before the child was even born.
Isn't that remarkable? One of the things I find in reading a book, this is historical fiction, but mind you, it's based on a real character.
Right.
And how remarkable is that? A real person, and that was her actual name, and we have actual documents that she wrote.
Right.
And that exist today. And as you pointed out earlier, some of those books are still read today.
Well, her remedies, this is a story basically of a child that was raised by her grandparents. And the grandparents were healers. They were natural herbists. And they taught her how to be an herbist, which was basically unheard of. It was for a lower class person to be a midwife and to do this, to heal people. And this child picked everything up and was so bright and just expanded that now 300 of her remedies are still used today.
It's extraordinary.
It is.
It really is extraordinary. You know, I wonder today as I look at the medical practice that we enjoy today, I look at it and I think, well, my gosh, it's like a quick examination. What do the test results show? Take this pill. But when you read the book, medicine is much deeper, wider, more interesting. They measure so many different facets of a person's being, their emotions, their bodies, their pulse, the breathing, color of the skin, appearance of the eyes, all of these aspects. And frankly, I wonder today if I go to the doctor, is he even paying attention? Does he notice at all? Does it not matter? Have we evolved medicine so far That it doesn't matter what you look like, what you sound like? I hope not.
I hope not too. But the weird thing was that in the Ming Dynasty, the doctors were male. And to treat a female person, they had to do it behind a screen. The female was behind the screen, and a midwife was there to go ahead, even if she wasn't pregnant, to tell the doctor what the patient looked like, how the pulse rate was. I mean, the doctor never even saw, basically, the patient. And then he would pull a diagnosis out of the air. And sometimes it was wrong. It was totally wrong.
Totally wrong.
Yeah.
But women, again, you have to understand, women were so subjugated.
Yes.
The whole purpose in life was to bear the children and, if I may say, entertain the husband and bear the children and be
Especially the upper
subservient.
class.
Respect and subservience was profoundly important. This is a world of ancient Confucian ideas from the sage Confucius and others. And it was a very ordered, very formal, very rigid.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
So,
and if the woman, the wife, did not bear a male child, they could trade her in for somebody else.
absolutely.
And if they needed to, the emperor of China had 99 concubines, and he could pick whoever he wanted if they didn't, and they have a male heir. But this is very, very fun. It was hard at points to read this book, especially when she had the the death of the woman by the pond.
Let's not give too much away, but what also struck me very strongly, there was
nobody stood behind her.
Well,
That's
no.
what bothered me.
Okay, that's true.
Nobody stood behind her.
Did you notice how formal and almost modern the justice system was?
Right.
I was surprised by that. The judges took their role extremely seriously. They were very scrupulous in their examination of evidence. They followed a set of rules. They had the accused present during the interrogation. I was quite impressed by that.
Yes, I was too. And I was also impressed how she, Young Shan, it's very hard to pronounce her name.
I called her Lady Tan.
She, how she weathered the storm of being alone because she couldn't, her best friend was a midwife, but of a lower class. And now that she was in an upper class, she couldn't associate with her.
One of the dominant themes, I think it's true, of Lisa C's books is the very close, very intimate, very loving relationship between two women, possibly more, but very close. Grandmother, mother, daughter, friend. Mei Ling and Lady Tan are the closest of friends. And that's such a long-lasting and endearing relationship.
Yeah, but she went through a lot to get that relationship. And you have to read the book because it will mesmerize you. It's to speak with her.
I am.
So hopefully we'll speak to her pretty soon. Now we're interviewing Lisa C. regarding her book, Lady Tan's Circle of Women. Jonathan Williams and I have both read it. We think it's a fabulous book. I've always enjoyed your books. And my favorite was Gold Mountain, on Gold Mountain. I wound up going to China 3 times to see all the things you discussed. And this book brought me right into the Ming Dynasty. It was phenomenal. Thank you for your writing. It's wonderful.
To be inspired by a real person and all of the things that she had, really had to overcome.
Right.
And how important she is even today. She's as but the people who are watching don't know. She's a traditional Chinese medicine doctor practicing 500 years ago. Not very many women in the world who were practicing as doctors at that time. So right there, she was pretty extraordinary. But the reason that her book is still in print, the one that she wrote, is because so many of the remedies that she created are still used in traditional Chinese medicine today. And I'd also like to add one thing. There is a bit of a mystery in this book, right?
Oh, yes.
Yes,
Oh,
very
definitely.
much. Well, not only mystery, there's a murder.
A murder mystery.
Well, that certainly goes quite a ways. I was excited by that.
Yeah.
And the most significant intervention in human history is midwifery. What a startling thing to say. He said, because the society...
Well, you can go ahead, but what I was going to say is that human beings are the only primates, but really for most animals, who need help delivering their babies. And it all actually, without getting too, physical about it, but, a human baby comes out head facing down, face down. So it's not like you could just pull it out yourself, where most animals can deliver their own babies. But humans, because our heads are so big, because we have our nice big brains, it takes a while for them to turn, and the way they end up is face down.
So what did you find the most interesting when you researched this book?
This book, there was so much that was fascinating to me. I mean, first I have Tanya Shen's own life, but of course, a lot of the research went way beyond what she herself did. So, there are certain stories in the book. When I was looking at sort of medicine and women in a more broad way,
Right.
I will just tell you that 3 of the stories, the story of, without, giving any,
Don't give away too much.
but the story of the worm, the story of the message written on the baby's foot,
Yes.
and what happens to the midwife in the Forbidden City. All of those stories happen to real women. So, when I'm doing research and you start here and then you start expanding, there are things that I find where I'll just think, oh, I've got to use that. I've got to use that. So that was part of it. But the other really has to do with death and how death was investigated. You touched on that there was this ministry of punishments, or board of punishments, and that the men who worked for it, they acted as the investigator, as the lawyer, as the judge, and of course the person who determined what the punishment would be. And all of this stemmed out of another whole book that I found during the course of my research that was written in 1245, I think it is.
Wow.
And called The Washing Away of Wrongs. And this is the oldest book of forensic medicine in the world. And so, they were trying to figure out, how did people die? Was it an accident? Was this something nefarious? Was it natural causes? And then, as I said, these men who worked for the Board of Punishments would go out and investigate death. And to me, this was so interesting, because you have these men who are investigating death in Tanya Shen's own family, her husband, her father, her grandfather, her uncle, her son. All of them worked for the Board of Punishments. So what they're really focused on is death. And then over here, you had these doctors like Tanya Shen, her grandmother, Dr. Huang, who's in the book. And what do doctors do? They are focused on healing. But in traditional Chinese medicine, there was this one prohibition, and it had to do with coming in physical contact with blood. They couldn't do it. And so Confucius, the great thinker and philosopher, had created a whole hierarchy of professions in China. And at the very, very bottom were those people who came in physical contact with blood: butchers, coroners, and midwives. And to me, this was really interesting, because what do midwives do? They bring life into the world. So I sort of had this kind of triangle that of death, healing, and bringing life into the world that I was I was playing with.
Wonderful job. Wonderful, just wonderful.
One of the things that I kept thinking about as I was reading is today when I go to the doctor, he takes a look at my test results and he maybe asks me one or two simple questions. I compare that with medicine as practiced by Lady Tan, for example, and the attention paid to the individual, the color of the skin, the look of the eyes, the pulse, the whole body. There's so much attention. And I sit there in my doctor's office and I wonder, is he even noticing me? I wonder if modern medicine couldn't learn something. There must be something about my physical being there that matters in some level. And I respect the Chinese tradition so profoundly because although they lacked what we have, they had so much on the other hand.
Right, but today I think you see a trend in Western medicine to be looking at the body and the patient in a more what's the word they always use, integrated way, so that they making that connection, let's say, between your physical well-being and your emotions. And that's still pretty recent, I think, in Western medicine, but we are moving in that direction.
Right, but the Chinese moved in that direction thousands of years ago.
Yeah, it's remarkable. In your research, you point out some of these medical traditions and methods go back actually well before the 1500s. They go back literally thousands of years. So this is not something invented on a whim. There's a lot of social norms that are tied up in it. Confucian philosophy gets mixed in a good deal. But all in all, I admire Lady Tan so much for her absolute devotion and commitment to healing. It just shines in the book. Another thing I appreciate about your book very much is the friendships. Women have the most precious friendships that we guys rarely have, but the women in your book are just marvelous.
Well, you're right. I am a woman. I do write a lot about women. I've written about mothers and daughters and sisters and friends. And friendship is something that I keep coming back to because it truly is unique. A woman will tell a friend something that she might not tell her boyfriend, her husband, her lover, her mother, her children. It's a very, very particular kind of intimacy. And of course, whenever you have your heart open like that, you are vulnerable to being hurt. So for all of the incredible good things we get from friendship, the support, the love, the laughter, a shoulder to cry on, there are those little dark shadows. And where I see those dark shadows, that's where I'm going to go.
Yeah.
Okay, Jonathan. You said you didn't know what you wanted to speak to Lisa about.
I know. But
go ahead.
I'd say one of the things that's oddly, if I may say, missing or not featured very much in the story is I love Chinese food. And there's so little attention paid to the preparation of food, the eating of food. But I had to make up for my own deficiency to an extent. I looked on the internet to look at women's clothing, because you described them so beautifully, but it was hard for me to imagine. What did that look like? So I typed in Ming Dynasty women's clothing, and my goodness, what an astonishing wardrobe. Just remarkable. These wealthy women were quite special.
It's funny you would say that about food because I think there's a lot about food.
There is.
Really?
Yeah.
Actually, I think there's quite a bit. But
I'm glad you said that.
I did really focus on clothes with this particular book, and I don't always. But clothing, especially, all the way to today, of course, is such a signifier of class. And economics. And so how Mei Ling dresses is, as a little girl, is very different than how Tan Yuan-shen dresses. How, so that these are how the concubines dress is very different than how the wives dress. And so because this was such a signifier of class, of station, of if you have any power whatsoever, if you're at the bottom of the ladder, and then, there's that scene, again, without giving too much away, when Tanya and Shun, who's been raised, a life of absolute privilege. She's of the elite class,
Right.
has to put on a pair of men's of work boots, over her bound foot shoes, and she dresses completely differently for this one scene, and how that makes her feel, and how she is or isn't able to disappear because she doesn't have all of the accoutrement of an elite woman.
That was a very, very touching part, too. Any questions that you want, Jonathan, that you want to ask Lisa? I don't want to give too much of this book away. And
No.
I'm feeling that
People
the
should
more
read it.
we talk about this,
Yeah.
the more we're going to give away. And I recommended it to some of my girlfriends, and I said, you have to get it. I know they've downloaded a few copies, and they're going to start to read it.
Well, while I was on the phone with my niece, she actually went to audible.com and downloaded the book. And that, incidentally, she mentioned to me, she needed it on an Audible format because she was about to drive, I think it's like 47 miles away in her role as a doula. She needed to attend this woman.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So it's perfect.
Yeah.
You're going to thank me so much.
Say it has been interesting how many people have contacted me, for example, to speak to their book clubs or to their organizations that are in the medical profession, whether nurses, midwives, doulas, a couple of hospitals even, because I think that even though medicine, obviously, there were certain things very different 500 years ago, there are things that have remained the same. And, there are only so many ways a baby can come out.
Right.
So, that doesn't matter if it was 1,000 years ago or 500 years ago or today or 500 years from now or 1,000 years from now. That this is something that is very unique and is part of human life and humanity.
That you do in the book, you say it in a number of different ways. The woman is a unique creation. I sense that in the book. I know there are places in the book where she's telling you about what it means to be a woman. And she says emphatically that we women are the same. And she makes that point very strongly in the book, that whether you're the highest echelon, the Empress of China, or whether you're the woman who is working in the field, a woman is a woman.
Right.
Right.
That really does come across in the story. And she says it a number of times explicitly.
Right.
She says it in so many words. A woman is a
Yes.
woman.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think it's so important that the title is The Circle of Women. Not just a woman, but the circle of women.
Yes, exactly. Well, that's exactly what I was thinking about. I was thinking about the circles that we make this way, of how we create friends and, whether it's at work or within our family or the people you play tennis with, but also that circle that's more like this. That again, it just what you were saying, that it doesn't matter if it was 1,000 years ago or today or 1,000 years from now, that if you're at the bottom rung of society or all the way up there like the Empress, that this is a kind of a continuum, another circle that we're all as women, and that we're all connected by our unique biology and physiology and our emotions as well.
Right.
My daughters call their mother every day. They do. Their mother and daughter talk every day. It's a blessing. It's a good thing.
Yes, it's a thing.
Yeah, it is. So what are you working on now? What can we look forward to?
I was working on the new novel until about 5 minutes before this interview.
Good.
I'm so deep in it. I mean, I'm actually right at the point that, a book is really around 400 pages usually for me, and I'm at about 365. So I'm right at the kind of climactic part of the book.
Okay.
And so I totally lost track of time. But this new one starts in China and then comes to Los Angeles in 1870. In Los Angeles at that time, only 500 people. It was tiny by comparison. San Francisco was already 150,000 people.
Right.
But Los Angeles, about 5,000 people, it was considered to be one of the most violent and wild of all the Wild West towns. It's not something we hear about very much.
No.
And of those 5,000, there were only 180 Chinese. Of those 180, there were 34 Chinese women. And so this story is based on the true stories of 3 real women who came to Los Angeles in that time. And while this isn't the whole part of the book, one part of the novel takes place during the Los Angeles Chinatown massacre, when 10% of the city shot, stabbed, and hung 10% of the Chinese men.
people. Yeah, a lot of people don't know
I
that.
didn't know that.
Yes, a lot of people didn't know
Wow.
that. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's stuff that is, and actually, there's so much that you don't know, right? So about that time certainly in Los Angeles, about what it was like for the Chinese, what it was like for these women. I mean, just imagine you're just one of 34 in this crazy, wild, violent, dirty, dusty town. And how brave they were, but also how victimized they were. So I can tell you that about half of them were wives. The other half were in the world's oldest profession. And this is after the Civil War. Slavery had been outlawed. It was in our Constitution. There was one exception, and it was in California, and it had to do with the sale and ownership of Chinese
people.
I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
Yes.
That's astonishing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that book.
I am too.
really am.
I might even read it. I'm excited about you. You write well.
I think Jonathan's going to become a big fan of
Well,
yours.
you write well, and I appreciate
Yes.
that. I admire the people who can just get you into the story. They write so well and tell a darn good story,
Yeah, especially when she does
even if
such
it's about
great-
women. I love women. So.
great research.
Yeah.
Okay, Lisa. Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much for having me. Hopefully we'll get to do it again one of these.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you. I
hopefully
hope so.
I hope you enjoyed Eyes on Books today with your interview with Lisa C. and her wonderful book. And you have a chance to go and read it. Jonathan,
Thank you.
for interesting discussions.
Thank you, friend.
And we hope you enjoyed today's show.